Welcome to the topic 5. This is the first lecture, and it's going to be on the self. And what we need to start with is just a simple definition of the self. And it's going to be pretty self explanatory. And the self is your own knowledge about you, or our knowledge about who we are. When you think of the self, you think of a lot of things like your attitudes, the things that you like, the things you dislike, how much you like or dislike them. And that's going to influence your judgment. So, for example, if I was to ask you, I used to ask my class, why did you come to Gettysburg College? Getting into Gettysburg College is not easy, right? And so, therefore, you've had to have had offers from bigger schools, like bigger state schools. So, why did you choose Gettysburg? And a lot of people, when they answer that question, I get a lot of answers. But one of the most common ones is that I just knew a big school wasn't for me. And so then I asked them, how did you know that? How did you know that a big school wasn't for you when you've never been to a big college before? Like you've never been a student there. And a lot of them answer, well, it's like, well, I'm a really anxious person around crowds, or I learn best when I'm in one-on-one situations. And, you didn't want to deal with the hustle and bustle of having, 30 to 50,000 other people around you. You wanted to be taught by professors, not by graduate students. And you get those answers a lot. And the thing is that how you know that answer is because of your knowledge about who you are. You would succeed better in other circumstances. And that's what the self is. The self is something that's learned very early on, and it continually develops throughout your life. This is something that is never ever static. So it's dynamic. It's constantly in flux and changing, and that's good. You got to imagine like how your self changes. Let's pick any topic. Let's pick religion, for example. When you're little and you're young, most of you will coincide with the religion that your parents do because that's what you do. You just follow what your parents do. I was raised Catholic, for example, so I would go to church with my parents every Sunday, would go to Mass. And, I got my first communion, which is a big deal in the Catholic Church and things like that. But as you get older and you start to learn about who you are and what you like and dislike, what happens is you start to some of us start to divert from our parents' religion. So, for example, for me, I followed my parents all along until I was in high school. And then I really started asking questions about my faith and about my religion and about certain religious practices. And I didn't agree with all of it. I didn't. And so what I started doing was exploring other churches. All right. And then what happened was eventually for me, I just stopped going altogether. Like I wasn't personally getting anything out of it. And I knew that. I knew that for me, going to any church was, I saw it as a waste of time. Now, if you don't, that's great. But I did. I never got anything out of it. And so in terms of the self, it changed from I was forced to go to these things, and then you can make the argument that I wanted to go in high school to try out different things, and then I just found out nothing really worked for me. And I know that because of the self that's always changing. Now, the self is going to be very, very important in social psych because it predicts behavior, and it's socially constructed, all right? And so let's talk about the 4 functions the self serves, and we're going to delve into each one of those specifically, at least these first 3. The function of the self, you see all the words the self there. Self-presentation, control, knowledge, and justification. This one right here, justification, is going to be its own chapter. This is actually going to be called dissonance. Okay, and we're going to talk about dissonance as its own topic next. So we're actually not going to talk about self-justification at all. Instead, we're going to focus on these 3 things, and we're going to talk about A, how they derived, and B, what function they serve us. All right. Before we dive into that, I do want to make clear about the self that even though it's dynamic and changing all the time, what we also have to understand is that, like I said, it is socially derived. And so when we talk about the self, we don't just mean, like, we have to think about where do we learn it. And I've kind of made the argument you learn it by trial and error, right? Like in my church example. But the self is construed and kind of developed in a lot of different ways. So, for example, when you remember the previous one, we talked about independent versus interdependent cultures. Guess what? That's related. That's part of yourself. The culture you live in determines if you're an interdependent person or an independent person. And we already talked about what implications that has. But check this out. Let's take a socially derived topic that we talked about last time. We talked about the fundamental attribution error. All right, remember, for a review, that was when you make an attribution about someone and you overestimate their dispositions and you underestimate the situation. What culture do you think makes the fundamental attribution error more? Independent cultures or interdependent cultures? All right, that error is made more by, drum roll, independent cultures. Independent cultures make that error more. And the reason why is because we're so focused on the self, I, me. You make the same dispositional attributions about others as well. All right, so the self matters. The self matters a lot. People who have a different self-construal, so people who view themselves as more independent, for example, make social psychological errors, the fundamental attribution error, for example, more frequently. All right, so this is going to matter. The self will matter a lot because it will predict behavior, and it is based upon these learned social constructions that we create and we have built into our society. All right, so let's talk about these three. Let's start with self-presentation. Self-presentation is really all about impression management, right? And our goal here is to get other people to see us as we want them to. So, impression management it's funny how this works. It makes a lot of sense once you think about it. Our goal is to present ourselves in a way that we think other people would like us more or whatever. Now, this is a very, very highly cognitive process, and we do it because we want to feel accurate, and we want to feel good doing it, all right? And so think about like on a first date, all right? You're on a first date with somebody. You try to portray yourself to be someone better, perhaps, than what you are. So this is an expression that I hope I don't offend anyone, but it was an expression that I've always heard where girls tried to hide the crazy and boys tried to hide the dumb. And the idea here is that if you're a female and your goal in life is to get married to somebody, you don't bring that up on the first date. You're not on a first date with someone and you're just like, oh, by the way, oh my gosh, I have to get married. I have to have like 5 kids and live in this house. I have to. Do you want to go on a second date? Like any normal guy would be like, yeah, no, we're good. I'm out of here. And guys, they want to hide some of the dumb grossness that they do. So, for example, when I was dating my now wife, the first time I ever had her come over for dinner, oh man, I bought like trash cans for my house. You know why? Because I didn't have any. Instead of using trash cans, what I would do is just open up a trash bag and just kind of put stuff in it. And then when it got big enough, I would just take it out. Like, who needs a trash bin? But I was like, that's kind of dumb. I can't have the person who I might like think that I'm just dumb. And what we do is we put on a different show for people. It's like a job interview. When I applied for the Gettysburg College job that I have now, what was I doing? I was smiling all the time. I was confident. I always sat up straight. I had really good posture. I was, and now if you ever come to my office hours or look at me, I'm not a smiley person. I hunch over all the time. I don't wear suits and ties to lecture like I did for my interview. And we do that because of impression management. I wanted other people to see me as professional and smart. And even though that's one side of me, it's not all of me. And that's what I wanted to portray, right? Now, it seems simple. Right? It's kind of the idea like, oh, if you want to be smart, you just walk around with big books. And if you want to if you want to go out to a bar to pick up a boy or a girl, sorry, I meant male or female. Let's back up. If you want to go out to a bar to hook up with a adult male or adult female, ugh, if you want to do that, then you dress a certain way. You wear certain clothes. There was a show on VH1, a reality TV show, where they would dress up these males who looked kind of nerdy, glasses, pocket protectors. And what they would do is every week they would dress them differently and, get rid of the glasses and put in contacts, get rid of the, weird looking hairdo and like wash it and gel it up and, color it. And they would do that with the attempt to pick up women. Right? So it seems simple, right? If you want to pick up another person at a bar, you dress a certain way, you act a certain way. If you want to look smart, you walk around with big books. That's the way these things work. But in reality, as a psychologist, we actually do this differently, and it's much more complex than you would think. So let's start with self-handicapping. There are two types of self-handicapping, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to present ourselves to be better than we are, all right? So what's going to happen first is, let's say you have something really, really hard coming up. All right, let's say you have a hard test. Self-handicapping, what we would do is, if you're afraid of failure, what you do is you purposefully create obstacles to reduce the likelihood that you'll succeed. So if you have a really hard test coming up, and there might be a chance you fail it, right? There might be a chance. What you will do is you will make it so that you actually fail. So you will drink before a test. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You think you'll fail, therefore you drink a lot, and guess what? Then before the test, and then guess what? You're hungover, and so then you take the test and you fail because you're hungover. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But what you do is you create obstacles, right? So you drink before a hard test. Now, why would anyone in their mind do this? Why would anyone do that, right? And the reason they self-handicap like this and they create these obstacles is because now they have an excuse for when they do fail. So if you're afraid of failure, instead of working hard and instead of getting an F, trying to get that C or whatever you need to do, oh no. Instead, you just blow it off, you drink a lot of alcohol, you're hungover, and you take the test, and guess what? You fail. And you do that because you want to feel good. It doesn't feel good to fail a test. And so now you have an excuse. So when your parents or your friends are just like, how'd your test go? And you're like, oh, I failed it. You're like, why? You're like, oh, I was drinking the night before, or this other thing happened. There was a birthday party I had to go to, so I didn't get enough sleep last night. And what happens is now there's an excuse created. Now, any normal person would be like, well, that's dumb. Why would you drink before a test? You're an idiot. But we don't think about that while we're creating these obstacles. All right, the other type is you make an excuse for your failure. So this is where, like, before you go golfing, if you're just like, you're sitting there and you're just like, oh, like before you first tee off, you're just like, oh man, my back is really sore, it hurts. And what we do is we are now self-handicapping. So when you do fail, it's not because you're a crappy golfer. It's because, man, my back is really sore, like I told you beforehand. And so that's what we're doing when we're self-handicapping. And the reason we do this is because it protects us. If we fail at something, all right, if we fail at something, whether it's a test or golfing or whatever, that makes us feel bad. And what we do is, where the task, even though it's hard, it's not your fault if you fail at it. All right, so you've created a situation now where you can fail because you have a reason to fail. And that excuse or that reason gives us the power to protect ourselves. So when anyone says like, oh my gosh, Chris, why'd you fail that test? I have an excuse, man. Oh, I had the flu going into it and I was really sick. That would be like type number 2. Or if I was like, man, I had a birthday party I had to go to last night. It was for my mom. I couldn't miss it. And we were up to like 2 a.m. and the test started at like 8 and I just didn't have enough time to study. That would be like type number 1. And what we're doing here is, once again, we're failing and we're making ourselves feel good. But here's the deal. You could have not done that. But we're afraid of failure. And when we're afraid of failure, we protect ourselves like this. And this is a way that we... and so then when someone asks, you have a self-presentation answer ready. Oh, it's the excuse. That's why it's going on. All right, that's why I failed. All right.